She didn't remember his name. To her, he was just another black teenager caught spray painting a wall behind the 48th Street liquor store. Another late shift, another report, another face she wouldn't think about by morning. The cuffs clicked on cold and fast, her voice steady and detached as she read him his rights, eyes scanning his expression just long enough to mark his defiance, but not long enough to notice the sketchbook that slipped from his hoodie. It hit the ground with a soft slap, pages flipping in the breeze like it was trying to tell a story no one wanted to read. He looked back once over his shoulder, not at her, but at that book, left open, exposed, as if his soul had been spilled across pavement and no one cared. And then, just like that, the door closed, both on the squad car and on a chapter of his life that would take 15 years to reopen. She never gave him a second thought, but he never forgot her. 15 years later, she walks into the same precinct on a rainy Thursday morning. There's talk of some new community project, local artists contributing paintings to precinct walls as a way to reconnect with the neighborhoods. She doesn't pay much attention, just breezes past the front desk with her usual coffee in hand, nodding at the receptionist. But something catches her eye. A painting, framed, bold, staring straight at her from the hallway wall. A face. A face she knows. Her breath stutters. She steps closer slowly, as if drawn by something magnetic. The painting isn't just a face, it's a memory. A boy's eyes filled with defiance, fear, pain. Older now, yes, but unmistakable. Then she sees it, the signature in the corner. DJM. She stops cold. Her hands tremble slightly and the coffee sloshes onto the floor unnoticed. She remembers now. She remembers everything. And in that moment, surrounded by sterile walls and the hum of fluorescent lights, the past crashes into her like a wave. The boy she arrested, his art now hangs in the very place that once chained him. He had every reason to hate this place, to forget it, to burn it from memory. And yet somehow his painting is here. Why? What was he trying to say? Was this forgiveness? A message? A challenge? She doesn't know, but one thing is clear. That one moment she thought meant nothing, meant everything to someone else. And now, 15 years later, it's staring her in the face. Because this story isn't just about art. It's about memory. It's about redemption. It's about what we carry and what we try to bury. And sometimes, the people we think we've forgotten are the very ones who never stopped painting the truth. It happened on a Wednesday, one of those dry, brittle afternoons where everything felt too loud. Car horns blared like angry questions, the sidewalk steamed under relentless sun, and tension in the city pulsed like it had nowhere else to go. DJ, real name Devin Jamal Monroe, had skipped school again, but not because he didn't care. He just couldn't take one more day of being invisible in a room where no one saw who he really was. He had a black book in his backpack, pages full of sketches, faces, pain, dreams, and a can of paint. Not for tagging, not for gangs, not for trouble, for expression, for breathing. He wasn't trying to vandalize. He was trying to speak. He'd been working on that wall behind the liquor store for 3 days. No one bothered him. No one asked questions. In his head, it wasn't graffiti, it was a mural in the making. He didn't even care if people liked it. He just wanted to finish it. It was a portrait of his brother, Deshaun, who'd been killed the year before, unarmed, mistaken identity. No justice, no apology. Just a mother who cried behind a locked bathroom door and a boy who stopped talking. Art was the only thing that made sense anymore. And then the cruiser pulled up. He didn't hear the first shout. He was lost in the rhythm of the paint strokes, headphones in, mind somewhere safer. When the door slammed and boots scraped pavement, he turned and saw her. Officer Corinne Whitmore. Late 30s, crisp uniform, steady gaze, hand already on her belt. She barked something he didn't catch, and before he could speak, she was in front of him, hand outstretched, pointing at the paint can, the wall, his backpack. Her voice was firm, her posture colder than the badge on her chest. Devin froze, not because he was guilty, but because he knew how fast things could go wrong. Because he'd seen boys just like him end up on the sidewalk, faces down, knees on necks, headlines calling them suspects before the truth ever had a chance. He didn't argue, he didn't run. He just nodded slowly and held out his hands. But something in his eyes made her pause just for a second. She looked at him like she wanted to see something human but couldn't quite get there. Not through her training, not through her own fear, not through the wall society had already built between them. She cuffed him anyway. The sketchbook fell as she turned him around, pages opening to a pencil drawing of a boy crying beside a gravestone. She didn't look down, or maybe she did and didn't let herself feel it. She led him to the car, placed him in the back, radioed it in. Vandalism, probable gang tag, minor male, no weapons. And that was that, except it was. Because in that moment, trapped in the back of a squad car, staring at the city through metal mesh and reinforced glass, Devin realized the rules were different for him. Art didn't save black boys. Talent didn't soften handcuffs. Even silence couldn't keep him safe. But what if? His silence wasn't the answer. What if his art, the same art they dismissed, could be louder than their judgment? He spent that night in a juvenile cell that smelled like bleach and rust, sharing space with two other boys who had nothing but time and anger. But while they talked tough and made jokes about getting out, Devin pulled a crumpled receipt from his pocket and started sketching. A face, her face, not as a villain, not even as a cop, just as a woman, one who didn't look at him, one who didn't see. And with each stroke, his fear turned into fuel. If they wouldn't listen, he'd make them look. Meanwhile, Officer Whitmore filed her report with clinical precision. She didn't mention the sketchbook. She didn't write down the tears in the boy's eyes or the mural on the wall. Just codes, timestamps, standard procedure. Another tick on a long shift. And though she forgot his name by the next morning, something about that arrest stuck with her. Not enough to lose sleep over, but enough to stir some strange discomfort every time she passed the evidence room. She told herself she did the right thing, the legal thing, the job, but 15 years later that job came full circle in the form of a canvas that refused to be ignored. Devin didn't become famous. He didn't get a TED Talk or a Netflix deal. He got probation, then community college, then a part-time job scrubbing floors. But he kept drawing, late at night, on scraps, on cardboard, on pain. And when a friend dared him to submit something to the city's Voices Unheard public art program, he laughed. Then he entered. Then he won. And when the organizers asked him where his painting should hang, he didn't hesitate. 48th Precinct, he said. The same place his story almost ended, or maybe where it was always meant to begin. The charges didn't stick. Minor offense, no priors, and nothing technically gang-related. But while the case disappeared from the court's docket in less than a month, it never disappeared from Devin's life. That mugshot, eyes red, lips pressed tight, hoodie half-zipped, followed him silently, like a stain the world didn't need to explain. The arrest didn't break him, not all at once. It broke him slowly, subtly, denial from a job here, a quiet look of suspicion there, a closed door at an art program he was once excited about. "We'll call you," they said. No one ever did. His high school treated him differently after the arrest. Teachers who once praised his creativity now warned him about appropriate behavior. A counselor suggested he consider a vocational track. He stopped bringing his sketchbook to class. He stopped speaking up. He stopped dreaming out loud. At home, his mother held it together with quiet strength, but even she couldn't undo what the system had whispered into their lives. That he'd been marked, not dangerous, just disposable. He could feel her worry in the way she lingered at the door before work, in the tired sighs she let out when she thought he was asleep. And late at night, when the city buzz dimmed and the shadows crawled in closer, Devon would lie awake and wonder what might have happened if she had looked at his sketchbook that day. If she'd seen who he really was, if she'd said anything different. But it wasn't all darkness. Somewhere in the quiet, art found him again. It came back slowly, in the margins of old notebooks, on brown paper bags from the corner store, on the back of fast food receipts, faces, stories, pain, hope. Sometimes he drew the city, not the skyline, but the corners no one wanted to look at. The laundromat with the flickering sign, the bus stop where his cousin was jumped, the church with the bullet hole no one patched. Other times he drew people, not models or celebrities, real people. The woman who sold tamales by the train, the man who swept the sidewalks before dawn, his mom asleep on the couch, still in uniform. He began to see things again, not just with his eyes, but with something deeper, something that refused to give in. One day, while cleaning out a storage box in the garage, Devon found his old sketchbook, the one that hit the ground when he got arrested. The pages were smudged, some torn, others blank, but many of them were still intact. As he turned each one, he felt himself breathe differently. He remembered who he was, who he still could be. With money scraped together from part-time jobs, he bought cheap supplies, pencils, acrylics, second-hand canvases from a thrift store. He painted at night, sometimes until dawn, always alone. He didn't post it online. He didn't ask for likes. He wasn't painting for attention anymore. He was painting to stay alive. It wasn't easy. Some weeks he had to choose between paint and food. He chose paint. Some months the doubt crept in like smoke. What if you're kidding yourself? What if that cop was right? But every time his brush touched canvas, he proved those voices wrong. Not with speeches, with color, with truth. He applied to art schools, got rejected. He applied again, got waitlisted, then finally accepted. A small community college with a decent art program, 3 bus rides away. He showed up every day, sat in the front, turned in every assignment like it was sacred. His professors saw something raw, something powerful. One called it visual testimony. Another said his work reminded them of Basquiat, but angrier, more honest. He started volunteering, teaching basic art to kids in after-school programs, many of them carrying bruises invisible to the eye. He never told them about the arrest. He just listened, showed them how to hold a pencil like a weapon that doesn't wound, let them fill sketchbooks with what they couldn't say out loud. Years passed. His style matured, bolder strokes, softer light, layers of pain beneath beauty. He still didn't have money, still worked side gigs. But one day he got an email. The city was funding a public art initiative called Voices Unheard, looking for artists who'd faced adversity, who had something to say. He applied, not expecting anything, just wanting to tell the truth. His submission was a portrait, a boy in handcuffs, his eyes wide but not broken. Behind him, a mural, unfinished, dripping paint. It was titled, Arrested Development. They called him a week later. He'd been selected. He didn't smile, he didn't cry. He just stared at the phone and whispered about time. When they asked him where he wanted the painting to hang, he didn't pause. 48th Precinct, he said. Back wall, somewhere people actually look. They hesitated. Are you sure? I'm sure, he said. It started there, it should live there. Not as revenge, not as a middle finger to the system, but as a mirror. So that every officer, every clerk, every rookie walking in that building could see what happens when we fail to see someone in front of us, and what might happen if we actually do. The day the painting was unveiled at the 48th Precinct, the sky hung low and gray like it was holding its breath. No speeches, no applause, just the quiet shuffle of feet on polished linoleum, and the rustle of a cloth being pulled away from a canvas that would say everything no press release ever could. Devin stood near the back wall, not in some proud spotlight but watching, still half disbelieving. Years of sketching in silence, of questioning whether his work had meaning, had led to this moment. Yet standing there in a police station, that police station, he felt like a ghost returning to the place where he'd been buried, not to haunt, but to remind. The painting, titled Arrested Development, was large, uncomfortably so. A portrait of a boy mid-teens, hands cuffed in front of him, eyes wide open, not pleading, not broken, just aware. Behind him, a wall half covered in a mural, unfinished, dripping, as if the arrest had frozen everything in time. No frame, no decorative touches, just raw color, raw silence, and the boy's gaze following every soul that dared walk by. Some officers looked and looked away, others passed without acknowledging it, as if hoping to ignore what stared back at them. But a few, especially the younger ones, stopped. Something in the boy's eyes held them, like it knew them, like it had waited for them. Devin said little during the installation. He signed the paperwork, nodded to the city's arts liaison, shook a few hands, and left before the cookies and photo ops. He had no desire to smile for a camera next to a badge. His statement had already been made, in acrylic, in shadow, in truth. Word spread slowly at first. A couple of community members who happened to stop by the precinct noticed the piece and asked questions. Someone snapped a photo, posted it on social media with a caption. Local artist paints truth into a place that once locked it away. The post gained traction, not because of algorithms, but because people recognized something rare in it. Confrontation without violence, pain turned into message. Comments ranged from awe to criticism. "This is real," one person wrote. "About time we saw art that doesn't flatter but forces us to feel." Another replied, "Nice try. A painting doesn't change policy." Devin saw that one too and didn't disagree. His goal had never been to fix the system with brushstrokes. It was to make it look at itself. Back at the precinct, something quiet began to shift. The front desk officer, who had worked there for over a decade, mentioned that more civilians had come in just to look at the art in the past week than ever before. A new recruit asked where the painting came from, and was stunned to hear the artist had once been arrested there. A sergeant, passing through with a cup of vending machine coffee, stood in front of the piece for longer than anyone expected, his lips tight, unreadable. Not everyone liked it. One officer called it a guilt trip, another muttered, "Why hang something here that makes us look bad?" But no one dared take it down, because every day, without saying a word, the painting greeted them. And every day, its silence grew louder. Some nights, Devin would ride the bus past the precinct, glance through the foggy window, and wonder if anyone was really seeing it, or just walking past like they once walked past him. But then he started getting messages. From teachers who showed their students the photo online. From young artists who said they felt seen for the first time. From a mother who wrote, "My son was arrested last year. I showed him your painting. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, 'So I'm not the only one. Thank you.'" Devin saved that one, read it on the hard days. A local nonprofit reached out asking him to speak at a youth justice event. He declined at first. He wasn't a speaker. He wasn't polished. But when he walked into their tiny community center and saw a dozen kids with sketchbooks in their laps, eyes on him, waiting, he sat down and told his story. Not the version for headlines, the real one, about fear, about silence, about the night in that cell when he drew with a borrowed pen on the back of a receipt because he had nothing else, about how that drawing became the seed of everything that came after. He didn't preach. He just told the truth. And when he was done, one of the boys, barely 15, asked, "How do you know when your art matters?" Devin looked at him steady and said, "When someone who once ignored you stops and stares." That's what the painting had become, not a decoration but a mirror, not a protest but a presence, the kind that lingers, the kind that makes people ask questions even when they don't want to. And somewhere deep inside the building, Lieutenant Corinne Whitmore passed by it, day after day, pretending not to notice. But it was there. And soon, the past she thought had faded would come walking back into her life, brushstroke by brushstroke, memory by memory. Lieutenant Corinne Whitmore had walked those halls for almost 2 decades, boots polished, badge firm, spine straight. She had learned over the years how to move through noise without letting it stick. She knew how to listen without absorbing, how to speak without revealing, how to carry the weight of things she never fully looked at. That's how she survived in a system that rarely asked for reflection, just compliance. But the painting, it asked. It didn't shout, didn't accuse, it asked. Every time she walked past it, sometimes 3, 4 times a day, it seemed to tilt slightly in her peripheral vision, as if the boy's eyes were waiting for her to meet them again. And she couldn't. Not right away. The first time she actually stopped, it was late, past midnight. The precinct was quiet, the air humming with vending machine buzz and the occasional voice from dispatch. She stood there for a moment, alone, and looked, really looked. The boy in the painting wasn't unfamiliar. She de-arrested dozens like him, but there was something about his stillness, his presence. The unfinished mural behind him reminded her of the wall she saw that day, half-painted, before her voice barked across the alley and changed the course of his life. And then the name in the corner, DJ Monroe, landed like a slow echo in her mind. Monroe. She felt it somewhere deep in her chest, like a door creaking open in a house long abandoned. She returned to her office, opened a drawer she hadn't touched in years, and found the old arrest records. She flipped through the yellowing pages until she saw it. Monroe Devin Jamal. Age, 15. Offense, vandalism, nonviolent. Her own handwriting, still sharp, pressed into the paper. She traced the lines of his name like it might explain something, might offer her a reason for why this boy had returned. Not in person, but in art, in presence, in judgment without anger. She sat back in her chair, remembering how quickly it had happened. She hadn't meant harm. She was following protocol. A suspicious figure, a paint can, an unpermitted mural. But as she let the memory unspool, she realized something she hadn't let herself feel back then, how little she had cared about the why. She didn't ask what he was painting. She didn't see the sketchbook. She saw a threat, or maybe she saw what she'd been trained to see. A young black male alone with spray paint in a high-surveillance neighborhood. She hadn't arrested Devin. She de-arrested an idea, a statistic, a silhouette. But now, 15 years later, that silhouette had painted her conscience on canvas. She began to see things differently. In meetings, during patrol briefings, even in the quiet elevator rides when officers made jokes about the sad wall art in the lobby, she said nothing. But something shifted in her. She started reading the intake notes more carefully, started looking at the kids they brought in with different eyes. One night, after a particularly tense call involving a group of teens loitering near a closed store, she watched an officer wave his flashlight too close to a boy's face, voice already thick with assumptions. "Step back," she said, not angrily but clear, steady. She crouched down, asked the kid's name, where he went to school, what he was doing there. He looked scared, confused, not guilty, just tired. She let him go with a warning and walked back to the squad car without explaining herself. She didn't need to. Later that month, she found herself staring at the painting again, and this time she whispered something under her breath, so soft even she wasn't sure what it was. Maybe I'm sorry. Maybe thank you, maybe both. And then one morning she saw him, Devin Monroe, standing near the lobby entrance, shoulders relaxed, hands in his pockets like he belonged there. Like the ghosts of the past had brought him full circle, not to accuse, but to observe. She froze. Their eyes met just briefly, and everything she hadn't said flooded up her throat. But instead of speaking, she walked toward him slowly. He didn't flinch, didn't smile, just looked at her, measured, quiet. "I know who you are," she said finally, voice low. He nodded. "I figured." Silence stretched between them, thick with history. "I saw the painting," she continued. "I see it every day." Devin didn't move, but there was something in his eyes, an openness, an invitation. "I didn't understand back then," she said, almost to herself. "I didn't even try. A pause, I do now." He looked at her, not as the woman who arrested him, but as someone who was finally willing to see. He didn't forgive her, not yet. Maybe not ever. But he nodded again, and that was enough. She walked away that day with something heavy and strange pressing against her ribs. Not shame, not pride, just awareness. For the first time in years, she let herself carry the weight of a badge not as armor, but as a responsibility to see better, to be better, and all because one boy chose not to disappear, but to paint. The room wasn't made for healing. It was a small, windowless meeting space on the second floor of the precinct, fluorescent lights humming above, old folding chairs pushed against pale beige walls, a stale pot of coffee sitting untouched near the door. And yet somehow that was where it happened. Not in a courtroom, not in a gallery, not on a street corner lined with chants or camera flashes. Just here, quiet, unscripted, two people. One conversation 15 years overdue. Devin didn't know why he'd said yes. When the community liaison officer reached out and said Lieutenant Whitmore had asked to speak with him, he almost laughed. At first, he assumed it was some PR stunt, or worse, an attempt to smooth things over now that his painting was drawing attention. But then he remembered her face the day they crossed paths in the lobby. Not proud, not rehearsed, just human. And for some reason he still didn't fully understand, he agreed. He arrived early. Sat in the room, hands folded, heart steady. The painting had done its part. Now it was his turn to decide what came next. A few minutes later, she walked in slower than he remembered, but no less composed. She wasn't in uniform. Just a gray blouse and black slacks, a soft fatigue in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She nodded at him, not as a superior or an officer, but as a person unsure if she even had the right to speak. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice low. Devin shrugged, his gaze calm but unreadable. "I was curious." She sat across from him, not too close but not hiding either. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The silence stretched, then settled. Finally, she inhaled, slow and deep. "I don't know how to start this," she admitted. Devin looked down at his hands. "Then maybe don't try to start with a speech." That made her smile, sad, soft, real. "I remember that day," she said. "I didn't think I did. For a long time it was just another file. But then I saw your painting and it all came back. The way you looked at me, the sketchbook, the way I didn't ask you a single question before I put you in cuffs." Devin's jaw tensed, but he didn't interrupt. He let her speak, let the weight of her own words fall where they may. "I want to say I'm sorry," she continued, eyes steady on his now. "Not just because of how I treated you, but because of everything I didn't see, everything I didn't even try to see." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "It's not about me wanting an apology," he said. "It's about you recognizing that you were part of something bigger. I wasn't the first kid you cuffed without asking questions, was I?" She shook her head slowly. "No, you were. And I probably wasn't the last." She nodded. "No, you were." Silence again. Thick, but no longer hostile. "You know," he said after a moment, "for years I thought about what I'd say to you if I ever saw you again. In my mind, it was always something sharp, something loud. But now that I'm here, I don't want to fight you. I just want to know why. Why was I so easy to arrest? Why didn't you even look at what I was doing? She blinked, tears gathering but not falling. Because I was trained to look for threats, and somewhere along the line, I learned to see young black boys with paint cans as problems, not possibilities. There it was, no excuses. No legal jargon, just truth. Devin exhaled slowly. That day changed everything for me, he said. Not just the arrest, the way no one looked, the way nobody asked me what the wall meant. That mural was about my brother. He died a year before, shot, mistaken identity, and all I wanted was to finish something for him, something that stayed. Whitmore looked down, ashamed. I didn't know. You didn't ask. He didn't say it with anger, just clarity. I kept drawing because it was the only thing they couldn't take from me. Not with a record, not with judgment, not with silence. She nodded, and now it's here in this building where it belongs. He tilted his head slightly. I didn't hang it there for revenge. I hung it there so people like you would have to see me. Not the version they're trained to see, but the real me. Whitmore wiped a single tear from her cheek. You did more than that. You forced us to see ourselves, too. For the first time, Devin smiled, not big, not performative, just honest. You know, he said, it still surprises me that I'm not angrier. Maybe you found something better to carry, she replied. They sat in silence a little longer, but it wasn't the kind that begged to be broken. It was the kind that heals. That holds the space where hurt once lived and turns it into something else. Maybe not forgiveness, but understanding. Before she left, she turned back to him. I don't know if I deserve it, but if you ever speak to young officers, if you ever teach, please let them hear this. Let them see that painting. Let them learn before they put on the cuffs. Devin nodded. That's why it's there. When she was gone, he sat a while longer. Alone, but not lonely. The walls around him felt different now. Not like the ones that once held him in, but like something he'd reshaped. Reclaimed. Not by yelling, not by fighting, but by painting what could no longer be ignored. Because sometimes the most radical act isn't to resist, but to reveal. And sometimes the greatest justice comes not through punishment, but through finally being seen. The painting still hangs there. Same wall, same frame. Same boy staring out with that quiet, haunting calm. It's been months now since the unveiling, but it hasn't faded. Not in color, not in meaning. People pass by every day. Officers, civilians, teenagers brought in for questions, mothers asking about their sons. Some glance and keep walking. Some pause, unsure why they're drawn to it. A few stand there quietly for minutes that feel like hours, absorbing the weight of what the canvas holds. Because it's no longer just a painting, it's a mirror. And once you look into it, really look, it stays with you. There are fingerprints on the bottom edge of the frame now. Smudges where people have reached out, almost instinctively, as if touching it might let them feel something deeper. There's no plaque explaining the story, no official title card, just the art and the eyes and the silence. Because some truths don't need to be spelled out, they need to be felt. And though Devin never asked for it, they kept his name visible. Not in bold letters, not on a banner, but there, handwritten in the corner of the canvas just like he signed it. DJ Monroe. For some, it's just a name. For others, especially the kids who have heard his story, it's a symbol of survival, of resistance, of choosing creation over collapse. Lieutenant Whitmore still walks by it every morning. She doesn't avoid it anymore. In fact, she's the one who made sure it stayed when new leadership tried to rotate the pieces. This one doesn't move, she said. No one argued. But the painting didn't just change a precinct. It sparked something beyond the walls. Other stations asked for similar pieces. Young artists, many formerly incarcerated or justice involved, were invited to submit work for their own local buildings. Not everyone agreed. Some called it performative, too political. But others saw it for what it was, a chance to tell stories that had long been ignored, and more importantly, a chance to listen. Devin didn't become famous. He still lives in a modest apartment, still teaches art to kids who don't trust many people but trust him. He still takes the long way home sometimes, past the precinct, just to see the painting through the glass, not out of pride, but as a reminder. A reminder that what we survive can become what we shape, that what once silenced us can become what helps others speak. One afternoon, he brought a group of his students to the precinct, not as suspects, but as guests. They stood in front of the painting, some of them quiet, others whispering questions. One girl, no older than 12, looked up and asked him, "Is that supposed to be you?" He smiled. "It was me," he said, "but now it's all of us." Because what hangs on the wall isn't just a painting of a boy who was arrested. It's a memory. It's a warning. It's a hope. And most of all, it's a promise that if we choose to see each other fully, even the mistakes, even the pain, we might finally begin to create something that lasts.